You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
Good morning and welcome to the Voice of Charity. I'm Katie Bredemann and I'm in the studio today with Phil Zepeda, Catholic Charity's Vice President of Communications. Good morning, Phil.
Hey, good morning, Katie. It's great to be back with you.
Absolutely. So delighted to have you here today. We extend a warm hello to everyone who's listening on WNDZ 750 AM here in Chicago and all who are watching our live stream on YouTube and Facebook at Catholic Chicago.
We've got a very important program, as we usually do, to talk with you about today. Thanks for joining us. Since 1979, Catholic Charity's LOSS program has been offering loving outreach to survivors of suicide. Now, 43 years later, LOSS continues to offer a safe, non-judgmental environment where survivors of suicide can find community, direction, and resources for healing. Now, Father Charles Rubey founded the LOSS program, and he continues to be its leader today. And Father Rubey has a tremendous staff that continues to help survivors wherever they are in the grieving process.
LOSS really is one of the most inspiring programs ever created at Catholic Charities. And here to provide an update on the LOSS program with us today is Emily Tegenkamp, who is a LOSS program coordinator. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much, Katie and Phil. I'm so happy to be here with you this morning. Thank you.
Welcome.
We're so delighted to have you, Emily.
Hey, Emily, let's start off with a pretty simple but a softball question. Remind the audience about the goals of the LOSS program.
Sure. Well, we like to say and remind folks that LOSS is a suicide bereavement program. So sometimes we do get calls from folks who are asking more about prevention services. And although we can make referrals for that, it's not our focus. We do what we sometimes refer to as postvention. And so we are the folks who are there to offer support and to give messages of hope for those who have lost a loved one to suicide. And that's one of the things that Father Rubey always, kind of guides us in, is that spreading a hopeful message is one of the hallmark goals of our entire program. And we do that through connecting survivors with other survivors in our support group and offering, individual counseling for traumatic loss. And so it really is open for anyone who's had that kind of loss, but we work in bereavement specifically for suicide.
Now, processing grief, we know, is a very personal, individualized thing. But there are some common stages of grief that most people go through at different times and at different paces. Can you talk a little bit about those stages of grief, and how does loss accompany people through those stages?
Sure, Phil. I think that, the stages of grief are something that it's just a very accessible thing. It's something that a lot of people have heard. And so it's a good thing for us to talk about. And I think it's something that's widely understood. And so when we talk about the stages of grief, traditionally, those were coming out of, research that was done around people who were close to death, who were dying, and sort of came up with this theory of what are common emotions that people feel toward the end of life. And then they were sort of adopted to how people feel in the grieving process. And so you've probably heard anger, acceptance, bargaining, and some of those big common emotions. And that's sort of how we talk about them in the LOSS program. So instead of talking about the grief process as a linear sort of thing where people will kind of find themselves in these stages, what we often talk about these stages of grief as being just common emotions that people experience after loss. And so one of the things that we do a lot of is just normalizing and validating, letting people know that what they're experiencing is very normal, that they're, even though these things are difficult to feel, they're not wrong, that there isn't anything, wrong with the way that somebody is grieving. But it's interesting because when we talk about those stages, one of the things that we deal with a lot in loss actually is guilt. And guilt is a feeling that doesn't always arise after every kind of loss. And sometimes we talk about how, although all loss can be very sad, not all loss is tragic and not all loss is traumatic. And that's the piece that we're working with in the loss program. And so that feeling of guilt is a really big one that our survivors experience. And the loss program is sometimes the only outlet they have to talk about that. And so we definitely accompany people. I like that you use that word because I think that's a big part of what we do.
And I know that Emily, Loss was founded heroically by Father Rubey and 3 couples who had all lost a child to suicide. And they courageously approached Catholic Charities and said, we're going through this grieving process, but we think there might be benefit in starting a program. And so I'm so inspired by those founding principles or that founding history of loss. Can you share with our audience, for those who might not be familiar, the many ways that loss has expanded through the years?
Sure, Katie, and it's such a good point, because I think learning about that history is really unique, to know that it started with 3 families, and then to look at how much it has expanded. And so those 3 families started meeting in their homes and hosting support groups in their homes, and from there it sort of expanded. So as other survivors joined, they started a group on the South Side where they started kind of the budding program, and then it really did grow throughout the Archdiocese of Chicago, to having several group locations, as well as partnering with the Diocese of Joliet, the Diocese of Rockford, and the Diocese of Gary, in order to host support meetings in a little kind of wider range for us. But then we also added individual counseling, which is a big program that we have as well. All of our clinicians have a caseload of some individual counseling clients. And then we added the loss program for children and youth. And so we do offer services for youth and adolescents and for families, in the ways of individual counseling, family counseling, and parent consultation. And those services are very, very important. Parents are often looking for a lot of guidance, and, they've been tossed into something that none of us know how to navigate. And now all of a sudden they're trying to help their kids through it too. And so, offering services for children and teens has been a big expansion of our program. And so I think that, we continued, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, a little bit later in our discussion, and the ways that we've continued to expand our program and have continued to make it more accessible. So
no, it's just wonderful how you've reached out to identify how men and women experience grief differently, and adults and children experience grief differently. It's so beautiful, Emily, how you and your colleagues have identified those differences and made sure that there's programs available for those who could benefit from them. I know that another part of your expansion over the years is starting an annual brunch where all the members of the lost community gather. And in recent years, you've had 950, 1,000 people attend. And I know you just had your brunch this past Sunday in a virtual format. How did that 31st annual Blossoms of Hope Loss Brunch go? How did that event go, Emily?
Thank you so much for asking about that, Katie, because the brunch really is a very special event for loss. And as you mentioned, we just had our 31st annual brunch. And the brunch is a very special occasion because although it is bringing survivors together in one room, and there's always that hope that people will connect with one another over shared experiences. One of the things that's so special about the brunch is that it's really an uplifting event. It's really meant to, spread some joy, and to, help others connect in a positive environment where we have delicious food and lots of smiles and really inspirational speakers that come and join us. And so It does definitely feel a little different to have to do that in a virtual platform. But we were just so pleased over these past 3 years that our Lost members and our friends have chosen to join us on a virtual platform where we've still been able to share with one another and, connect in that way. I'm seeing some beautiful photos of people that I recognize scrolling through here too. And that's one of the things we miss in the virtual event is that we can't see everyone and know who's joining us, but certainly the spirit is still there, the giving spirit of our own members and wanting to support and connect.
And I know a part of that Loss Brunch, Emily, is raising funds for the continuation of the Loss program. In fact, on the 40th anniversary of Loss, Father Rubey established an endowment fund. So again, that funds can continue to come in for those who'd like to contribute to the success of this program. For anybody in our audience who might have missed the virtual event or who would like to contribute to Loss, can you please share some information with us so that folks who want to can reach out and be part of the Loss Brunch even after the fact?
Sure. And that's a good point, Katie. We're planning to keep this particular campaign open until mid-May. And so there's still plenty of time to donate for our Blossoms of Hope event. If you are on the Catholic Charities website and you look up Blossoms of Hope, that's us, that's our program. But we're also a pretty small program in terms of staff here at Catholic Charities. And so we're also easy to get in touch with. So if someone were to call our main line, which is 312-655-7283, or send us an email at loss@catholiccharities.net. We'd be very happy to have those discussions on how to walk somebody through making a donation or how to contact us. But we definitely consider the brunch one of our biggest fundraising events. And we're just so grateful to our members who are so generous in giving back and really, using their connections to also raise money for the program. So definitely ways to donate. And if you contact us, we can certainly walk you through that.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Emily. I know that you have a wide array of individual and group sessions to help people express, their feelings to the extent that they're comfortable doing so. What additional resources do you offer people who are suffering from being a survivor of suicide? What other resources besides the sessions?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have people call us for several different reasons, and sometimes that depends on who they've lost or how far along in their loss that they are. But we really try to be flexible and sort of meeting people and helping them, kind of meet the needs that they're expressing to us. And so we have folks who contact us, for example, out of state. And although we have a virtual platform now where you're very welcome to join our support groups, our licensure doesn't allow us to do counseling out of state. And so we do a lot of resource referral and looking up resources for people closer to their area, especially if they're looking for counseling or if they're looking for perhaps individual services for their teen or for their child that they want in person. But we also do consultation with schools, in the aftermath of losing perhaps a student or a teacher. And those things are always so tragic, and make sure that people have the resources that they need after things like that, as well as consultation. So sometimes we have folks who call us who just want to know, how do I talk about this with my friend who, just lost her daughter? What do I say and what do I do? And so sometimes we're just kind of talking through the language that we use, or we're talking about ways that we can sort of put somebody at ease about something or not put them on the spot. And we're also contacted frequently by other parishes around the country who want to know how we implement the LOSS program and how they might be able to get something started in their area. And so we just try really hard to sort of know what the resources are. I think, we've got a lot of social workers on staff, and I always think that's part of our job is to, kind of know what's out there too, so that we can make those referrals. But we always want to be a stop for people if they're looking for resources.
What a wonderful network you have built, along with Debbie Major and Father Rubey and all your facilitators and all your volunteers. It's really quite impressive, Emily. If you'll please bear with us, we're going to take a quick break here on The Voice of Charity. And when we return, we're going to continue our conversation with Emily Tegenkamp about Catholic Charities' LOSS program. Please stay tuned. Catholic Charities has had the privilege of helping people in need in Cook and Lake County for more than 100 years. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our frontline workers who, despite the unprecedented challenges of the past 2 years, continue to excel at their jobs every day. From the warehouse staff members who pack boxes of nutritious foods for low-income seniors, to the dedicated WIC employees who have remained open for families with children under the age of 5, to our volunteers and restaurant partners who ensure that meals are available for those experiencing hunger, to our service coordinators and our professional counselors who continue their vital work in innovative ways, to our food pantry staff, and to all those who work at Catholic Charities Call Center, finding solutions for every person who reaches out to us for help. Charity is at the heart of all you do, and we salute you.
We are at the Most Blessed Trinity Parish Food Pantry in Waukegan.
And here we care for people in need. There was definitely an uptick in the needs for services.
We doubled our volume after COVID hit, from servicing about 250 families a week to about 500 a week. We supply bread, tortillas, vegetables, milk, cheese, butter, proteins, fish, chicken, eggs.
Well, the Annual Catholic Appeal has been a tremendous help to us, especially over the past year and a half.
Without the Annual Catholic Appeal, we might have to close our doors. Our parish is the largest one in the Archdiocese, but is very poor. We think about food and we think about nourishment, but we also nourish the soul, provide that connection to humanity.
The good works here are made possible through the Annual Catholic Appeal. Make your gift at annualcatholicappeal.com.
Welcome back to The Voice of Charity. I'm Phil Zepeda with Catholic Charities. I'm joined here with Katie Bredemann, as usual. Welcome back to Catholic Radio. We're here talking with our colleague Emily Tegenkamp, who's coordinator of the LOSS program at Catholic Charities, which stands for Loving Outreach to Survivors of Suicide. Emily, welcome back for us. I want to, you touched upon this in the question that Katie asked right before we went to break. A big part of what you do is allowing people to acknowledge and experience their own pain, right? So that they can obtain some level of peace and acceptance of it. It sounds very simple, but it's very complex. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Sure, absolutely. And you're right. It's a really complex question in a lot of ways. And I think that one of the biggest things that we do is to hold space. I think that the LOSS program is often the only place that people have to share their stories. Suicide in general can be very scary for people. It can be very uncomfortable to talk about. And although, I think our individual members are working to sort of fight that stigma, we're definitely aware that this might be the only opportunity they have to talk about their loved one, to share their name, to talk about the pain that they're experiencing. And I think through that, when you have somebody who can, look at you across a table or even across a computer screen and sort of nod their head and say, yeah, me too. Yeah, I went through that too. Or that sounds very similar to something I experienced. There's so much power there. And one of the things we always make sure is that we have peer facilitators in our groups, for example. And so that we have someone always who's a little further out from their grief, who can model that there is life with loss, that there is life after loss, that, new experiences can happen and that's okay. And so I think sometimes just that gentle accompanying people is really what helps with that, is just knowing that it's okay to talk about, and we give people space to do that.
Yeah, those stories, I imagine, are so incredibly important in helping the survivors celebrate their life of a loved one. What advice or wisdom would you impart to individuals, family members, and friends to do that themselves?
It's another really good question, Phil, because, one of the things that Father Rubey always says, and something we certainly agree with, is that we need to remember that our loved ones are so much more than how they died. And so I think a part of how we can celebrate their lives is remembering their full lives and the richness of their lives and the people that they touched and the people that they were connected to. And so I think a big piece of that is, we concentrate a lot, of course, on anniversary days. Those are big, heavy days, but we also encourage people to acknowledge birthdays. Because those are already celebratory days, and that it's okay to still acknowledge, the life of your loved one. And we encourage involving them in special events and special occasions, keeping them close, through ritual, either by having a photo, sharing memories, sharing a name. And I think, just giving opportunities to speak your loved one's name can be so powerful. And also in our publication that we put out, we do have a section that's called Mention My Name. And a part of that is also to celebrate the lives of loved ones, to have other people read those names, and to acknowledge your loved one, maybe send up a prayer, or just kind of, a kind, warm thought for somebody else. And I think it's another really beautiful way. But we certainly, recommend, please keep them in your family celebrations, have a candle for them, or, you can set a place at the table for them still if you would like to, but to remember that they can still be a part of your lives, that those relationships continue.
And you mentioned the Obelisk publication, Emily, which is such an inspiring newsletter, founded by your team many years ago. Can you please remind our audience the symbolism of that beautiful obelisk figure and how that newspaper helps to fulfill the goals of LOSS?
Absolutely. So the obelisk is definitely the symbol for our program. And we sort of talk about that as a beacon of hope, that it's a symbol where people have to work together to put it into place, and it sort of rises higher. And the way that we hope that our hopes are kind of rising too, and that it can sort of be something to look for. And it's kind of funny because I have one that I keep with me here at home. That was actually a gift from my mom. But because that symbolism is important, and I think it's important for us to keep in mind. And then the publication itself, I think, is really rich. The articles that are shared are often written by survivors and share their survivor experience. And we also have a staff column where members of our staff can share sort of what's going on in the program or themes that are sort of coming up. And it has a large readership and a large reach, both online and our paper publication. And so it's definitely reached a lot of people in a lot of different areas, and hope that it's bringing hope and inspiration to a lot of people.
It's such a great publication, Emily. So kudos to you and the team for putting that together. I often, during the pandemic, or as we're looking in these days of emerging from the pandemic, to look back at the silver linings that we've seen throughout the last 2 years. So much has happened over the course of the pandemic. Positive things for the LOSS program that have helped more people learn about the work that you do. Can you explain a little bit about a few of those opportunities?
Sure. And I have to say, Phil, that it wasn't without its challenges either. So the LOSS program, just like many other programs at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of thinking to do and a lot of reworking to do to move a lot of our programs online and make them more accessible for folks. And we have been pleasantly surprised that has gone quite well. I think at the beginning, people were a little hesitant to join us online. I think it was intimidating maybe to be in a support group on a computer screen. But what we found is that people have gotten significant support, and that it's actually been really nice for a lot of folks to not worry about leaving their homes, to drive somewhere to find parking, in January in Chicago, looking for a support group. And so we found that it actually has become pretty accessible for folks. And in doing that, we've actually been able to really expand our services for groups. And so we have welcomed folks. I think the count now is 23 different states since the pandemic began. And so really from coast to coast, from New Jersey to Washington State to Florida. We've had someone join us from Singapore when he was on vacation. So it definitely makes it more accessible for folks now that we're virtual.
And Emily, in the short time we have left, if anybody in our audience listening or watching today's show is suffering as a survivor of suicide from, recently or many years ago, and if they're still struggling, what would you say to them? And how could you please remind them again how they can reach out and contact you and everybody on the LOSS team?
Absolutely. The one thing I will say is that I'm a survivor too, and that I was actually a client of the LOSS program before I came on staff. I lost my older brother. And so I definitely understand what it's like to pick up the phone and to make that call. And I always want people to know that there's going to be someone who understands, who can, just offer some comfort and some support. And so I just want folks to know that, we have people who have utilized the program who are still here supporting us, who, really understand. And so we always welcome inquiries from folks at any stage of their grief journey, whether it just happened, it happened years ago. So you can contact us at 312-655-7283 or loss@CatholicCharities.net. Those are the easiest ways to reach us.
Emily, we're so grateful to you for being with us on the show today and reminding us of the vital work that you and the LOSS team do. So thank you for your wisdom and the love that you pour into your job. Again, anyone in the audience who knows of someone who could benefit from the LOSS program, please call 312-655-7283 or email the LOSS program at loss@CatholicCharities.net.
And we invite everyone back again for another edition of The Voice of Charity next Tuesday. I, too, thank you, Emily, so much for being on the show today. We thank everyone in the audience for tuning in and believing in the mission of Catholic Charities.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.